I did a thing on stage a while back, and I'm sure you've seen the video because it's online, where I took someone who had a really horrible shellfish allergy and brought them on stage and opened up a can of crab meat. I derma rolled their arm to mimic an allergist dermal stamp test. So it does micro punctures in their tissue, and then I put crab juice in it from the crab meat can. And of course, they had an instant histamine reaction, got welts on their arm, everything blew up, and you could see the redness.
I hope you got a waiver signed from them first.
Actually, humorously, on that note, when I called the fellow, Philip, the CEO of Leela Quantum, said, hey, we're doing this conference, and a lot of people are having a hard time believing that this is real. Could you do a demonstration in real time live that will show people that this actually has merit? And I said, oh, yeah. I think I got something for that. So I called my friend Todd and said, hey, so I want to do this experiment on stage. And I know you have this really horrible reaction to shellfish and specifically crab meat. So could we take some crab juice and use that? And he goes, do you want me to put it in my eye? And he literally, he's one of the kindest and most trusting people you will ever meet. And I said, no, man, like I definitely don't want you.
No, I just want to microneedle you with it. That sounds so much better.
Yeah, well, actually, it probably doesn't sound so great. Sure, I'm going to punch 100 little bitty holes in your arm. Yeah, but so we got on stage, and Todd, was great with it. So I derma rolled his arm, and he got that histamine reaction. Then I put the stuff in a quantum block, which for people who don't know is just a series of metal plates, no electricity, no magnetism, but it affects quantum flux. And that seems like kind of a strange concept to a lot of people. So I just asked everyone in the crowd, I said, picture a waveform. In your mind's eye, just picture a waveform. And I said, I'll give you a second. And then, as is always the case, I said, let me guess, you thought of something kind of like this. Because that's actually a representation that people are taught, right? Well, what I've kind of experienced and found, and it's always been there, it's just me kind of scratching through the layers of the disinformation campaign that we have unwittingly played on ourselves over time. Like, we keep getting little pieces of the puzzle, but not seemingly all of it. It's not like a waveform like that. It's not some 2D little representation. I found that it's spheres undulating with a particular chirality and a spin and a pressure gradient and a tone and a color. And, there's kind of how much of the ecliptic it changes and the orbital rotation and the axial revolution. There's all these different components to it that you kind of look at and go, damn, there's like 20 different things that I need to utilize to define what something actually is in terms of a waveform. And we just, we go, it's the frequency. Like that's the amplitude. There's really not, there's not a whole lot of descriptors. So I'm trying to modulate things at a more fundamental level and take into account a few of those things. And so what happened in this case, I just left the can of crab juice in the block for about 3 minutes, and I took it out, derma rolled his other arm with a new derma roller, and then I put the crab juice in, and nothing happened, right? He just had the redness from being derma rolled, but there was no histamine reaction. And literally everyone kind of went, oh, like a dog that heard a new sound, because it was so in stark contrast to what we normally see, right? If you have an allergy, you don't suddenly lose your allergy 3 minutes later. But in truth, you think of yourself as solid, right? And people, we express, my desk expresses solidity, we express solidity, but in reality, we're really not that solid, right? Einstein nailed it. He said reality is an illusion, albeit a persistent one. And we're really like 99.999999% space. So if you think of everything in terms of interactive waveforms, some things have constructive interference patterns and some things have destructive interference patterns. If you have something that reacts with your own physiology, what you're actually experiencing, in my best assessment at this point, is you're experiencing a destructive interference pattern where the waveforms clash. And so those clashing points cascade up and they trigger something to happen biochemically. And then that's expressed as a histamine reaction. So I was simply modulating the waveforms to make the waveforms more conducive to working with that fellow's specific physiology. And the net effect was you have a histamine reaction and allergy in 1 second, and 3 minutes later, you don't. And so even if I'm completely off base about everything, in my opinion, as a scientist, it's sort of incumbent upon you when you see something that's completely in stark contrast and weird and expressing wildly anomalous behavior, you don't go, well, that's aberrant, I'm just not going to pay attention to it. It's like statistics, you just kind of rule out the top and the bottom of it. I don't think that's how science is supposed to work. I think we're supposed to be agnostic enough about things to go, right, I've dropped the ball 1,000 times, 999, it hit the ground, but that one time it just stayed there hovering in the air. we'll pay attention to that, right? Like something is strange. That's what we're supposed to, that's what we're supposed to look at. We're not supposed to go, well, statistically speaking, it hit the ground about 100% of the time. So call it good.
Yeah.
I think we're really supposed to like find that thread and go, how the hell does that work? What is that? And just keep pulling that thing until we get some idea. And that's how things move forward. Not to digress too far from your original point of what's in the cupboard that helps you, but just to give people a context wherein they can see sort of the mindset behind looking at these things. Because if you say, oh, I'm going to take a nanoparticle and I'm going to bind it to a lipid, just a fat, and then I'm going to use that to punch in through your cell membranes and wedge into your mitochondrial membrane, right? Kind of in the sort of the interstitial space in between your mitochondrial membranes and the inner and outer membranes. Well, why would a person spend as much time working on that as I have? Because it gets results. I've seen it help people. I've seen it help a lot of people. And I don't fully understand the mechanisms and the way my kind of crazy ADD, ADHD, slightly OCD brain is wired. Until I really understand something, I generally don't put it down. And I really want to understand the mechanisms whereby this is actually affecting so much change. It seems obvious to me after looking at ATP output levels and cytokine levels that really, when you modulate mitochondrial function, you get this huge leverage and can knock out a host of diseases and pathologies that you normally wouldn't be able to. And that I think, unfortunately, we've done a really poor job in Western medicine of actually addressing. And a lot of that I just think is it's financially motivated. Like things in a biological sense work better with preparations that are holistic, that approach things across multiple facets. But it's hard to patent that, right? And what drives drug development? Patentability and profit. It's really not a system that's geared towards helping people based on the people. It's, helping people's bottom line based on profits. And so, granted, I'm not a billionaire. I might be if I took a slightly different approach to this, but it's not really what's driving me. I'm big into the puzzle and trying to figure out, what's happening and what's going on. And it excites me. I get up crazy early and I work crazy late because I love this stuff. I still get jazzed by the fact that I actually get paid to show up to a weird lab and do basically what is mad science and try and figure out lots of puzzles across a whole host of different domains. It's awesome.
Mm-hmm. A quote that comes to me when you were talking is that it's Arthur C. Clarke. Any sufficiently advanced technology is indistinguishable from magic.
That is so very true. And a lot of times, some of the things that I do as demonstrations, people think it's, some sleight of hand, wackadoo, kind of thing. I'm like, yes. I'm not that skilled.
Misdirection,
look over here. Yeah, I'm not nearly that skilled. It's actually, I a lot of times I don't understand it myself, and that's why I'm playing with it. Is I'm really very diligently grasping at the straws of my own understanding, trying to, catch on to whatever I can.
I met somebody years ago who this fascinated me. He was allergic to bananas, but somehow accidentally he ate an organic banana or some organic banana and he didn't get a reaction. I'd be curious if this guy would take the banana that is not organic, that he would have a reaction against, and a severe reaction. Like, it's like not something to be played with on stage or anything, but to put that in the quantum block or the infinity block from Leela, let the quantum energy transmute it, and then consume it and see if he has a reaction. I have a feeling that he would be non-reactive to that, just like he was non-reactive to organic bananas.